report reigniting the debate over crimes kids are accused of committing outside the school that should be reported to school systems.
It's the high number of offenses that are happening in the state of Maryland.
But there are questions about if those alleged crimes are actually being reported.
According to this, there were 21 reportable offenses in this last school year.
I find that to be probably inaccurate.
I'm going in depth on the issue, pressing lawmakers on what they're doing to close what some are calling a gap in communication. Thank you for joining us for this week's edition of Fox 45 News in Depth. I'm Mikenzie Frost. Today we're focusing on reportable offenses, with the Maryland Department of Education releasing its latest data for the 2023-2024 school year. We first reported on these reportable offenses in October right here on Fox 45 News in Depth. At the time, there were growing concerns surrounding how offenses were reported to school districts after a series of violent incidents inside schools.
That is something where students are directly at risk by this offender, and they're being put in classes right next to your son or daughter, and that's something that there's an obligation to tell about. But the reporting requirements are very strict, and they basically default to the privacy of offenders, not to the safety of other students.
Now, one of those incidents raising concerns really stems back to a deadly shooting at Joppatown High School. Police say a 16-year-old, Jalen Prince, shot and killed 15-year-old Warren Grant inside a school bathroom. Harford County Sheriff Jeff Gaylor told us the suspect had a history with this office, but juvenile privacy laws kept any potential criminal history a secret from the public.
We had 10 interactions since 2022 where he was either the victim, the witness, or the suspect in an incident involving just the Harford County Sheriff's Office. Criminals don't tend to stay within county lines, so who knows how many interactions this young individual had.
Now, the most recent data shows more than 2,000 reportable offenses involving students in Maryland public schools, but the differences between counties are staggering, and it's raising some questions about whether the numbers are actually adding up. What happens on school grounds is typically closely monitored. Any fights or other violence is tracked and reports are made. But off campus, it's more of a challenge to know what's really going on. State law requires law enforcement agencies to report to schools anytime a student is charged with a reportable offense. These are a list of crimes, including homicide, attempted homicide, firearm violations, assaults, carjackings, and a slew of others. The latest report from the 2023-2024 school year reveals 2,088 reportable offenses unfolded, with most being from assaults, illegal gun possession, malicious destruction of property, car theft, and robberies. We sat down with Clyde Boatwright, president of the Maryland Fraternal Order of Police.
This is very, very telling, and we need someone to dive into why is that happening, and why is this happening with the same young people over and over again.
Looking through the information in here, what stuck out to you the most about the data?
It's the high number of offenses that are happening in the state of Maryland. When people champion root causes, but over 2,000 incidents with young people and dealing with these type of serious violent crimes, we as a state should be deeply concerned about the high number of incidents.
The report shows data in Maryland's communities are very different. 17 reportable offenses unfolded in Anne Arundel County, 156 in Howard County, 329 in Baltimore City, but Baltimore County more than double the city with 881 reportable offenses. Right now, the law requires notification to the school superintendent by the arresting law enforcement agency within 24 hours. But Boatwright says that notification may not be happening.
I honestly believe it's about the education of police departments. And if you look at an area like Prince George's County, there are 26 different police departments in Prince George's County, Maryland. And so to have 100% compliance, I think it would be kind of unreasonable because, you know, some small towns, police department with 4 or 5 police officers, they're probably not going to be as well versed as maybe a larger police department in a municipality than that of a municipality.
And according to this, there were 21 reportable offenses in this last school year.
I find that to be probably inaccurate because Prince George's County has a high population of juveniles, just as high as Baltimore City, Baltimore County. Only 21 incidents involving juveniles occur for the whole year. That doesn't seem accurate to me.
Maryland's laws on reportable offenses in the spotlight.
In the previous school year, Baltimore City reported significantly fewer qualifying offenses than the county, just like this year. In response to our questions about the data, City Schools tells Fox 45 News it resubmitted the data to the state to ensure and confirm that all reportable offenses were included, adding, City Schools is only made aware of the reportable offenses that law enforcement or other agencies tell us about. Baltimore County Public Schools says it is looking into the numbers, despite the school system being the agency reporting the data to the state. BCPS's statement continues with, we want to remind the members of the community that these offenses occur outside of the schoolhouse. The questionable data, even from the school systems reporting it, gets to the heart of Boatwright's point.
Whose responsibility is it to ensure that the law enforcement agencies know what the requirements are?
I think that's education that comes from the General Assembly.
He says lawmakers need to take a deeper look at whether law enforcement agencies simply don't know the law itself or are skirting it.
But if there's an agency that is just deciding that they're not going to participate in this, then you have to find some sort of penalty to hold them accountable.
Why is it important for the public to have a full picture of all of these incidents?
Well, I think it's important because in order to make sure that you're accurately using the resources the way that we should be using them, you need the right data to do so. And so we can direct resources towards young people to get them the assistance that they need. And so it starts with accurate reporting and making sure that that the people that make the decisions as far as making the right calls to hand out these resources are well aware that these type of offenses are happening.
What does this data signal to you about the efforts in the state when it comes to addressing juvenile crime?
So this data shows that we have a long way to go.
School leaders can use this information to determine what type of educational setting is best for the student and the broader school community. But without an accurate picture of what's really going on, it's impossible to make informed decisions.
Now, after we first brought you the concerns surrounding reportable offenses, Governor Westmore ordered a top-to-bottom review of how information is shared between the Department of Juvenile Services and schools when it comes to students who commit these offenses. It's not clear if that review is finished or what came of it. I also asked Senate President Bill Ferguson about what lawmakers are doing to address reportable offenses amid growing numbers of students arrested during the last school year. He did not have a clear answer, telling me he'd have to look into it further. We just saw the newest reportable offense report came out, and more students were arrested for these offenses last school year than the previous school year. So the problem continues, and school districts don't seem to be getting this information as quickly as possible. So do you know where that stands?
I don't. I'll have to look into it. I do know that there is a focus on the how does it actually practically happen? And I think that there had been some ongoing questions as to who owns the information and how does it both protect student privacy but get to the right district at the right time when a court system is involved. So I've got to go back and check. I don't know where it stands right now.
Meanwhile, Republican lawmakers are pushing a bill to change the definition of a reportable offense. Right now, these reportable offenses do not include any crimes that happen on school grounds or at a school-sponsored event. Senate Bill 36 would remove that requirement. It also would require DJS to let school systems know what happens with juvenile cases after an arrest. Supporters of the bill say it's necessary to protect students and keep suspects away from their alleged victims.
It is paramount. Our responsibility to protect them in these venues should be our first tenet of responsibility to ensure they have a safe place to learn and thrive. And if we have to upset someone because they have violated other one's trust, to make sure that the school board is notified so that we can then properly maintain and keep an eye on them so that we don't recklessly, and I will repeat that, recklessly endanger the well-being of others, then that is our job. That is what we do, and that's what this bill is about.
Month after month, case after case, the victims are asking us to communicate with the schools. You know, they're afraid. They're seeing these people on a regular basis. It's not just in the neighborhood, it's at school. They're worried about going to school. The kids don't want to go to school. Can't you? The request is always, won't you talk to the school officials? Tell them what's happening in court, and I can't.
Now, that bill is cross-filed with one in the House. We'll speak with two of its sponsors coming up in just a few minutes. One thing neither bill addresses, though, is the communication gap between school systems and the Juvenile Services Education Program, or JSEP. That's the education system within the Department of Juvenile Services. While JSEP does share students' education records with public schools when students go to re-enroll, their criminal history is not included. On Fox 45 News In-Depth last year, JSEP superintendent and the Maryland State Department of Education told me the General Assembly would need to take action to change it. The superintendent of JSEP also says right now, even JSEP doesn't have that information.
Of course, we know that if they're with us, there has been some sort of activity, but we don't have the details as to why a student has come to JSEP.
Is that something that would be beneficial to the teachers or to the social workers or anybody within JSEP to know that information?
Maybe the social workers, I don't know if it would have anything of any assistance for our teachers, just because, you know, we know that because they're with us, there has been some type of activity.
Now, right now, it's not clear if lawmakers plan to take up any bills that would close the information sharing gap between JSEP and other school systems. Still to come, we're breaking down a House bill proposal that would expand the definition of reportable offenses. Two of the bill's co-sponsors join us live to talk about why they're pushing for this change. And as we head to break, let's take a look at some of today's top headlines.
It presented itself as the opportunity of a lifetime. All reward, no risk.
Having known people that had success, it did seem that it was something that was legitimate.
Nico Stouts lives in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, but says a friend who worked alongside Justin Rieger as a teacher inside Carroll County Public Schools made the connection. She touted massive returns, successful withdrawals, and vouched for Rieger as a Christian man, allegedly with a foolproof algorithm for maneuvering the cryptocurrency market. Phelps deposited his initial investment 2 years ago, saying at first, too good seemed to be true. Last Tuesday, Taneytown police discovering Rieger's body in a public park, a gun found nearby. Police reporting it an apparent suicide. The Carroll County Sheriff's Department claiming their financial fraud investigation into Rieger began before his death and remains ongoing. In a statement saying several potential victims have come forward, reporting hundreds of thousands of dollars lost.
The Senate Judiciary Committee voting to advance Kash Patel's nomination.
I think we should get started.
To be the next director of the FBI. Thursday, Senate hearing on Patel comes after Democrats successfully delayed the nomination process from going to a vote last week, saying they still had important questions for Patel.
We are inviting a political disaster if we put Kash Patel into this job.
Senator Dick Durbin claiming highly credible whistleblowers told him Patel is behind the recent mass firings at the FBI, even though he has yet to take the reins.
Parents and community leaders are demanding accountability after a massive brawl broke out at Woodlawn High School. Now, here's a warning. The footage you're about to see is disturbing. In the video obtained by Fox 45 News, you can see students screaming and attacking each other. One student repeatedly punched in the head. It does not appear any adults tried to intervene. The president of the Randallstown NAACP warning something needs to be done to keep students safe.
We have to make sure it's safe. I just, you know, if we don't have safety, if the kids don't feel safe, I just don't know how they can learn.
Under current Maryland law, this fight would not be a reportable offense for any of the students involved because it happened on school grounds. But a new bill making its way through the State House is looking to change that. House Bill 526, cross-filed with Senate Bill 386, would change the definition of reportable offenses to include incidents that occur at school and school-sponsored events. Now, joining us live to talk about those proposed changes are two of the House bill's co-sponsors, Delegates Jason Buckle and April Miller. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Mikenzie.
Thank you for having us.
Delegate Miller, I want to start with you. Why is this bill necessary given the concerns that we're seeing with school safety right now?
I think school safety is so important to all of us in our committee. We hear, because we sit on the education committee, we hear a lot about incidents that happen in school and trying to find different ways to protect students. And this bill came out of some of the glaring gaps that we know in how we can keep students safe and what is reported to the school system, what's reported to our SROs, and whether or not the offense happened on or off school. There's been a lot of incidents, especially in Hartford County, where there have actually been sexual assaults and rapes and all kinds of violent issues that happen at school, on school grounds. And because of the way the legislation currently stands, because the way the law currently stands, they don't have to report it. They have their own process by which they report. And so we want to make sure that those kids are protected.
Delegate Buckle, right now there seems to be a concern that not every law enforcement agency is reporting these type of offenses under the current law as it stands. Do you believe that is the case as well, given the numbers that we're seeing from the latest report?
There sure seems to be a reason to suspect that, whether that's intentional, whether it's policy-based, or whether it's just folks who don't really understand what they're supposed to do. This should be pretty common sense, and it's important to note that these things that you just saw, happening in Baltimore County, Baltimore City, they're happening in my community too, in Western Maryland. I don't know exactly what's going on. I have an 8-year-old little boy. I'm terrified looking to the future, sending him to middle school and high school and looking at these fights. This is not normal, and something has gone wrong with our system and with the folks working in our system. If you're engaged in that type of violent assault that we just saw and that we've seen other examples of, I don't care if that's on school grounds and you're in 8th grade or 10th grade or whatever grade you are, that's a crime. Those children who are involved in that, other than just defending themselves, certainly we want to protect kids' ability to self-defend, but those kids who are the instigators of that and are just committing these terrible violent acts, they need to be treated just the same as if they did that in a mall or a parking lot or any place else. They need to be brought under control. They need to be reported to juvenile services, brought to the state's attorneys, brought to law enforcement, and it needs to become a reportable offense so that sticks with them, so that people understand, hey, this kid has had a problem. It's not to stigmatize them for life. It's to make sure that they get the appropriate interventions and the appropriate consequences to hopefully change their behavior.
It seems like there are two different tracks of these reportable offenses that seem to be of concern right now. There's the incidents that may happen on school grounds, and that's what your bills would really deal with. But then also the incidents that happen off school grounds that may never be reported properly under the current state law. Have you heard of any other legislation, perhaps from your Democratic colleagues, Delegate Miller, in your committee, any conversations about this to ensure that everyone knows what is required, everyone has a clear understanding of the law, so that these school systems have a clear understanding of what's really going on?
Yes, and one of the reasons why we brought the bill is because there is a gap, especially when it becomes the Department of Juvenile Services. The state's attorney's office is tasked with reporting the offenses and reporting it to school systems, but the Department of Juvenile Services is not. So most court cases involving minors are sent to Department of Juvenile Services, not the court system. So the school system doesn't receive any resolution to the charges. They don't know what's happened, and that's very important with protecting victims and protecting other students who actually may be sitting in the same class with them. So this has that missing piece that we would require Department of Juvenile Services to get involved and to get involved with the school system so that we can close the gap, and that school systems have all the information they need to have their school safety meetings that impact the safety of the entire community at the school.
Let me just ask you really quickly as a follow-up to that. Do you believe that DJS would be capable to provide that level of information given the reporting concerns that we're already seeing with the department?
It's that's a real concern. The Department of Juvenile Services is broken, I think, and you know we've talked about this before in other contexts over the last year or two. Mikenzie, the pendulum has swung too far. 5, 8, 10, 12 years ago in Maryland, you saw this policy pendulum, and the Department of Juvenile Services reflects it. Of we just want to be soft, we want to be restorative. That's a great word. We want to have second chances, third chances, sixth chances. I want that too. I don't want kids to get on the wrong path and wind up spending their careers and their lives in criminality. But the pendulum swung too far where we have DJS and other reporting agencies that are almost intentionally not reporting information. You saw it happen to the individual in Howard County that was supposed to be under monitoring in Anne Arundel County for a very serious violent offense. Wasn't really under monitoring. They didn't tell anyone in Howard County, and he wound up killing someone, you know, while a student in the school, and he had a loaded handgun in school. That can't happen. People make mistakes. The world isn't perfect. But when the policy sort of reflects that, it just doesn't work. And DJS they've got a lot to answer for, I think, going forward. They can be a big part of solving this problem or a big part of continuing to cause it.
All right, delegates, thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to following this. I know there is a hearing coming up on this bill, I believe, next week. So we'll keep our eyes peeled for that and keep us updated. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mikenzie.
All right, this week we asked you, do parents have a right to know when their child's classmate is accused of committing a crime? We'll take a look at some of your responses when we come back. This week, we asked if you think parents have a right to know when their child's classmate is accused of a crime. Let's take a look at some of your responses. We have a lot of people who say yes, like Patrick, without question. Debbie says absolutely. Eric says depends on the crime, and that's also what Jack says. Until you're innocent until proven guilty. It's up to the education department to take steps. Brooke says depends on the nature of the crime and not until convicted. Thank you for those responses. That's it for this week's edition of Fox 45 News In Depth. I'm Mikenzie Frost. Mary?